Hello, my name is Marcelo Rennó, and this time we're doing an international interview here with Rosemary Mula, who's a worldwide known volunteer, has an amazing story, amazing inspiring story, went to many countries to help develop the Olympic Games there, and your story is truly amazing, and it has some relation to a Brazilian icon, and we'll get into that in a few times. What about, you were born in England?
Yes.
And then you moved to Australia with your parents. How was that? Were you involved in sports already or
Yes.
no? Yes?
Yes. When I was growing up and I went to high school in England or grammar school, I actually was a very good 100-meter runner. And of course, like every kid, when you're good, you think you're outstanding and you have dreams.
Yeah, it's good that you think that way, yeah.
But then when I was 15, my family decided to migrate to Australia. And I was not happy.
I can imagine, yeah. Losing all your friends and so on and so forth.
Friends, family, school, everything familiar. And we're talking in the 50s at that time, when you went to Australia, you were never ever going to go back again. You went by ship, it took 6 weeks, and that was it.
Yeah, and no WhatsApp, no internet, nothing. Yeah, only letters that came like a month or so.
Yes, it took 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And I was on the ship going to Australia. I was a very angry teenager. And but my father was a tradesman. He worked with his hands in an iron foundry. So he had no business connections. I don't know how he did it, but a few weeks after we arrived in Australia, we arrived in Melbourne, it was the Olympic Games.
You arrived just in time for
6 weeks before.
Yeah.
But at that time also, the Olympic Games was not really a worldwide, because it was not international television. They used to film it, put it in a tin thing, put it on an aeroplane, yes. But my father got me a ticket to track and field. And I was, of course, excited because I was a track runner. And but when I arrived at the Olympic Stadium, I was very disappointed that my ticket was on that side of the stadium and not this side where the 100-meter track finish was. However, it was the final of the men's triple jump.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay. And at that time, the hot favorite to win the gold medal really was the man from the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And
Shevakov, yeah.
And there was an American who was quite fancied. And there was the defending champion from Helsinki, Adhemar Ferreira da Silva. But he was, even by Australian media, considered a bit old.
Yeah, it's not.
For an athlete, yes.
Have you ever heard of him before this day?
Never.
Never.
And in fact, I grew up in a tiny country area in England. I had never spoken to a black man before. But Adhemar being Adhemar, he would run over to the fence, and you have to remember, in those days, athletes didn't have all this psychological focusing and visioning, and they just competed.
Yeah.
And he came over, and I was sitting the second row, and there was a lot of school children my age, young teenagers. Are any of you children interested in sport? You know, you need to do your homework, listen to your coach, your parent, all the stuff that's important. And we were sitting there going, he's got a gold medal and he's talking to us. It was like magic. And in the final, there was no British man, there was no Australian. So, of course, we got behind him. He told me later he really felt it. And by this time, we were telling everybody sitting up behind us, so we had everybody supporting him.
Yeah.
And they got to the last round, and the Soviet he was, they're not Russian, was sitting on the gold medal. And then suddenly this man, Einarson from Iceland, that had never won a medal ever, at
Oh,
the
yeah,
Olymp-
the
in
first-
any sport, got up, and he jumped a metre further than he ever jumped in his life. And he's sitting on the gold medal with Adhemar.
Yeah.
And Adhemar got up. And
That's what I'm going to ask you. Was Adhemar nervous about this newcomer? It was 1626. He broke the Olympic record.
Yeah,
Not too much.
not very. He seemed to be very.
Nonchalant about it.
I can't control that. I can control me.
Yeah.
And we of course wished him good luck, and we were all chanting Da Silva, because by then we were really excited.
Okay.
And he went.
Not this time.
And so we all. And he just. And he was extraordinary because in his whole career, he never got a red flag.
Yeah.
He never fouled a triple. And he told me later he always had 3 markers along the way so he could judge his speed. And of course he had great speed and great balance, and he just flew, and we all just went, and we could see when he hit the pit that he'd broken the record and he'd won. And in 1956, medals were not presented on a ribbon, on a lanyard. They were presented in a box.
Yeah.
And also the podium was tiny. It was like this big. And so he put on his tracksuit, and we all felt like this is our new best friend. And he went round, and the medal ceremony, of course, was on the 100 metres finish side. And we had never heard the Brazilian national anthem ever. I mean, there wasn't communication in the 50s. So when we heard it, we saw the flag go up, we all started crying, and it was very emotional. It's like, that's our friend. And when the ceremony was over, he ran around to us, and across the fence, he handed us the box with the medal and said, you kids won this medal for me, thank you. And I had that gold medal in my hand, and I thought, that's it. I am definitely going to be an Olympic athlete. I'm going to march at an opening ceremony, and that's what I'm going to do. And it was just massively inspirational. And I went home that night and I couldn't stop talking about it. So my father said to me, so Australia's not so bad.
Yeah, now you like it. Yeah, I told you. Was that so much a life-changing event for you? Was it really like?
I think so, yes, because I, at that age, if you're unhappy and angry, and you can go in many directions, but this just brought me back to athletics, and let's get going. You're not going to get the Olympic Games unless you train really hard. Yeah. Unfortunately, 3 years later, when I went to school, I won all inside my school, my district, my super district, I won it all. And I went to university, and I said to my father helped me with a little bit of coaching. Oh, they've just got a small athletic meeting inside the university. I don't know if I should even take my running spikes. My father said, you should never run without proper shoes. I said, well, what about my starting blocks? I will feel stupid if I have them. And he said, look, take them. If nobody else has them, then you're going to win. If other girls have it, then use yours. And I got there, and there were already 2 women hammering in their starting blocks, and I thought, okay. So I put mine down, and on your marks, get set. I ran, and I got home that night, and my father looked at my face and he said, you were beaten today. And I was, into 3rd place by 2 women that had represented Australia at the Commonwealth Games, and one of them went on to be an Olympic silver medalist.
And they didn't know that before,
and I had never been beat. I was distraught, because it suddenly meant that all this work I was putting in, I wasn't good enough. I mean, this was just in my university and I couldn't win. I thought, ooh. But not long after I had an emergency appendix, and then I got into university, and
Everything
then I
changed.
got boys. And
Your life changed.
yeah.
And there's two things I want to say about this. First, about fate, because Melbourne won the Olympics over Buenos Aires by 1 vote.
Yes.
And you got in the Olympics in Melbourne just weeks before.
Yes.
So any of those two things that were very close, if they didn't happen,
Yes.
maybe
My
your life
life
would have
would
been different.
completely
yeah,
different.
It's incredible to
Completely
think about it. Yeah,
Yes.
it goes to everyone's life, those small things that change everything.
Yes.
And the other thing that I like about your life story is that it's not normal, and I say this in a positive way. You didn't start, you didn't continue to become an athlete that like normally, like let's say a film story would be like that. No, you got on with your life, you got married to Wilfred Mula,
Yeah.
and became a teacher and so on and so forth. So, and later you came to sports, which will
In a completely different
way. Yeah.
And it was interesting because when I married my husband, a few weeks after we were married, they asked him to leave Australia and go and be the general manager in Singapore.
Yeah.
And we lived there for 5 years, and he headed up a printing ink company. And one of my new best friends there was in marketing and public relations, and she said to me, "Oh, Rosemary, there's a really great exhibition on in a big hotel. You must come and see it. It's all from South America."
This was 1976.
77, yes.
77.
Yeah. And she said, "Just come and find me and I'll take you around and show you." Oh, okay. So I walked in and I got to the door, and
You saw something.
I saw this man talking to somebody, and I went,
You knew him right away?
oh, no. I thought,
Maybe.
is it? It can't be. Because I saw him and he's
Sure.
wearing a tie and a shirt and a business suit. And he looked up, he said, "Madam, can I help you?" And I said, "Are you Adhemar da Silva?" He said, "Yes." "Do I know you?" And I said, "Well, no, but I know you." And he said, "Were you one of those kids by the fence?" "Yes." And he said to the dog, let them in. So I went in, and it was lovely because he said, "You know, you're the only person in my life now that saw me win my medal."
Because Dietrich Gärtner, his coach, had died. Yeah.
So he took me round to everybody in the Brazilian delegation and said, "She saw me win my medal." And it was, and he gave me his business card, and it was a great experience. And but again, in the 70s we didn't have emails.
Yeah, nothing like that. So you lost contact with him.
We did.
Yeah.
And then in 1990, but always, of course, that brought back all that emotion
Sure,
about, "Oh, I'm sorry, but anyway, I'll go to the Olympic Games and watch." So in 1993, Sydney was bidding for the 2000 Olympic Games. And the envelope was open, and the winner is Sydney. And I thought, that's it. I can be an Olympic volunteer. So I signed up very early, like
Extremely early, yeah.
in 1994, yes. And they said, "We have a few categories of volunteers we need from now until the Games. And Rosemary, you're a former teacher, so we might make you an Olympic communicator, but you could also do tours of the stadium. And because you lived in Singapore, you're used to greeting foreigners. We would like you to do some airport meet and greets." Okay, and they said, "Do you have any preference for countries?" And I said, "Well, obviously the UK and Brazil." They said, "Brazil's coming next week." Oh,
Good.
I said, "Right, in the evening." So I went, and SOCOG, Sydney Olympic Committee, provided a minibus because it was quite a big delegation coming from Brazil, with the driver, and my job was to pick them up, take them to the hotel,
Show them around, yeah.
give them all their briefing, and explain next morning I would pick them up and take them, because it was evening,
Yeah.
take them to head office where there would be meetings, because for every Olympic Games, big delegations come and they check on many things for their team. You know, hotel for their guests, the food that's available, and the transport, and the weather, and the venues. It's an important part of
Sure.
the planning for every country. So we got in the bus, and President Newsman said to me, "So, Rosemary, you're a volunteer." "Yes, Mr. Newsman, I am." So he said, "So, apart from Pele, Ayrton Senna, and Gustavo Kuerten, who was the big tennis player, what do you know about Brazil sport?" Ha! Funny you should ask me. I told him the story, and I said, "I don't know if he is still alive." "Oh, absolutely. I will put you in contact." And they were terrific. The COB staff and with Newsman put me in contact with Adhemar. Immediately they got home, and we started corresponding by fax.
Yeah. That was it, yeah.
And I said to him, "At the games time, can you come and stay with us?" And what happened is my husband needed to buy an apartment for a staff member who came from Melbourne. And my husband decided to buy an apartment right next to the Olympic Village. And during the games, my job, I was the manager of the protocol assistants in the village, and we did the team welcome ceremonies each day for the different nations, for their flag to be raised, the anthem. You know, and for small countries, it's such an important thing because it's the only time
Sure.
they hear their anthem and see their flag. So, and as manager, I said, "Okay, I'm going to do Team GB and Brazil." And I didn't tell the friends I now had at COB because I'd seen them all a few times. And I led the Brazil team in to the flag ceremony in Sydney, so that was
special
exciting.
moment,
It was, and I had a great time during the games, and when it was time to go home, I took Adhemar to the airport, and of course we had plans to meet in Athens, and my husband said, "Yes, I can take some time, and we had our own business by then." He said, "We'll take time off, we'll go to Athens and watch him, meet him and watch the games." And we got to the airport, and I said, "Adhemar, you know, you inspired me. I wanted to be an Olympian, but I wasn't good enough. But I had my Olympic experience. This 6 years has been amazing, and I've met some amazing people, including Nelson Mandela and the King of Norway and many athletes. But sadly, it's over. In that moment, I will never forget. Adhemar took my face into his hands and he said, "Rosemary, your Olympic journey is not over. You need to find a way." And I thought, hello, the games in my lifetime are not going to come back to Sydney, and probably not Australia. So this just is not possible.
Had he not said that, would it have been really over for you? Maybe.
I don't know.
It's hard to know, yeah.
Because I was very...
But you really were down, like...
Well, no, it was just, I was sad, but I was excited because I'd had an amazing experience, and all amazing experiences.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it's like going to a wedding, I think, you know, when it's over. You have great memories, but it's over.
Yeah.
But, and then the company that launched the book about Adhemar's life invited my husband and me to come to Sao Paulo for the launch of the book, which we did.
Yeah.
And we spent a week here, and it was fantastic. And of course, by then I met Adiel and his grandson Diego, and I was ready for Athens. Is only 4 years away. And I'll never forget, We were in bed, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and the phone in our bedroom was on my husband's side, and he picked up the phone, and I said, when the phone rings in the night, it's never good news.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I heard my husband say, oh, Anna Marisa, there's the lady from COB. And I thought, oh, well, it's not Adhemar because he's in Sao Paulo, she's in Rio. And I heard my husband say, oh, that's awful. Okay, yes, I'll tell Rosemary. And he hung. And I'm thinking, who in my friends in COB has had a problem, an accident or died? And my husband put the phone down, and I'm sitting up, and he put his arms around me, and I thought, oh no, I don't want to hear this.
But you sensed it, that it was him. Yeah.
When my husband put his arms around me, I knew that he knew I needed a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
And he told me. And because he was only 71.
Yeah.
And he was just starting to get, I think, some recognition, and he was getting programs happening at a university in Sao Paulo. And
Yeah. Did you feel that his illness before, or no? It was a big surprise.
Yeah, no.
He had diabetes. Yeah.
Yes, and he was naughty,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It was a shock.
Yeah, sure.
And I said to my husband, you know what? We need to do something in Australia to honour the country where he won one of his gold medals. And I had no idea what I would do. And it's like these things keep happening to me. And about 6 weeks later, one morning, I was listening to breakfast radio, and a headmaster from a sports high school in Sydney called this radio station, and the school was in a fairly socio-economically low area in Sydney. Sure. And he said to the journalist running the program, who's great with sport, he said, we have 4 young men who have worked for 12 months to save the money for their air ticket to go to Paris to the school, international schools, Olympics or whatever they call it. But these kids cannot get another dollar from their friends and family, and they need a uniform.
Just a uniform.
Could some of your listeners maybe help these boys? And it was 6 o'clock in the morning. I was in bed, and I don't know why, but I got out of bed, I picked up a pen and a paper, and I wrote down the number of the school. And he said, please, can you call once the office opens, if you can help? So I waited and called the school, and the lady who answered, luckily, said, oh, are you interested in athletics? And I said, oh yes, very interested. And I said, how much is it? And I think she said $300. And I said, is that per student? And she said, no, that's the total. Yeah. And I said, okay, we'll pay it.
It's amazing. I see a lot of sports, and I accompany the sporting world. It's amazing how sometimes a small amount of money makes all the difference in the world. Sometimes we think, oh, they need millions for this. Sometimes, yes, they do need millions for some very technical thing.
Yes.
But sometimes it's just a matter of $500 and it solves the problem. And nobody pays sometimes.
Yes.
Just one person can make a difference. It doesn't even have to be rich.
So she said to me, so you're interested in athletics? And I briefly told her, very briefly. She said, oh, that's a great story. Can I tell our director of athletics? I said, that's okay. So about an hour later, he called me and he said, I can't thank you enough. This will be amazing, etc., etc. He said, look, next week we are having our athletics presentation night. Would you like to come as a guest of the school? Okay. So I said, actually, I have just recently received Adhemar's shoes that he won the 56th Olympic gold medal. Would you like me to bring it? I said, it's not like a modern 100-meter runner, but it's got the odds. And I said, and when Adhemar came to Sydney, I'll never forget, opening ceremony night, I invited all my friends and family and people from my husband's office that could not buy a ticket into the stadium because they were limited, obviously. But our apartment looked at the Olympic Stadium, and the road about 50 metres away, all the buses were going down and taking the athletes to the opening ceremony. So I put on all the food. I had bought tickets myself with my husband. And when everybody was there, and I introduced Adhemar, of course, and they were all thrilled to meet. And Adhemar said, Rosemary, I have a gift for you. And he handed me a box, and he had a replica made of his 2 gold medals.
Yes, fantastic.
So I said, okay, everybody, if you want to know what all these athletes want,
Here
it is. Yeah. So I took the medals to this school event, and the kids were... and I briefly told my story, and I said to them, and these kids were from quite poor homes, and some of them parents who were not very interested, and I said, do you know what? You're all in the school because of your athletic ability, and I can't tell you how much I envy every single one of you, because every one of you has the ability to go to the Olympic Games as an athlete. It's too late for me, but I wish you all well. Yeah. And driving home that night, I said to my husband, that's it. I've worked it out. We're going to create the Adhemar Ferreira da Silva Memorial Scholarship. Yeah. And every year, and these kids, again, came from homes where they were not encouraged to read or write. They loved sport, but they didn't like all the other stuff at school. So I said to them, all right, I'm going to create this scholarship. And when I told Roberto Gesta de Mello and Adiel, the CAB people said they would send a ticket for the winner of the scholarship to come to compete in Brazil each year. And my husband and I gave them a check to help them. And I said, now, for me to consider you for the scholarship, you need to write down what you've achieved this year, what your short-term goals are, what your long-term goals are. Yeah. And if you win it and you get this check, how will you spend the money? And the teacher said, Rosemary, we love you. We can't get them to write, but here they've got a reason to write. Yeah. They must. Right.
In their interest, yeah.
So they did. Yeah. And it's interesting because 2 of those winners in the last 15 years have become world champions.
Yeah, Fabrice Lapierre, I wrote it down.
Danny Samuels, who's Danny Stevens, and Fabrice Lapierre.
Yeah.
And
probably they wouldn't without the scholarship.
And every year, at presentation night, the highlight of the night is the announcement. And I now get the Consul General for Brazil to come all the way out of his office in the city. And many of them didn't know the story. And I have a great short 30-second film of Adhemar competing and singing and with his family, and it's lovely. And you know, every kid in that school now knows who Adhemar Ferreira da Silva is.
Yeah. Probably more than many Brazilians.
Yes, and then after 5 years, we decided to bring a young Brazilian athlete. And I said to Adiel, you know, you and Diego can choose, but it must be somebody from a disadvantaged background. Sure. And preferably not related to any administration people. Yeah. So that we give the athlete, and we bring them to Sydney. Unfortunately, they can't stay long because the coaches here want them but it's okay.
But no,
And I saw recently on Facebook, one of them has recontacted me, Clayton Sabiano, and he said it was life-changing for him.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that's what Adhemar would want.
That's a legacy there.
So then, 2002, I have really dear friends in the diplomatic service, and he was made ambassador in the Commonwealth, High Commissioner to Kiribati. Well, the first thing I had to do was look at a map and see where is Kiribati.
Yeah, it's written Kiribati, but
they don't
Kiribati.
have an S in their language. T-I together makes S.
Yeah.
So, and they only use something like 15 letters instead of 26.
They had never took part in the Olympic Games. Yeah. They
And
didn't have a national committee.
No.
Nothing.
So we went, and as it happened that week, my friend, the ambassador, had been inviting the president of Kiribati and the treasurer and a couple of ministers to his residency home for a formal dinner on behalf of the Australian government, you know. The president accepted the invitation that week that I was there.
Incredible.
And Colin, my friend, had tried for the Sydney Games to encourage, because what we did in Sydney was we sent the Olympic torch flame around the Pacific to all those small countries on the way to Sydney, because we knew they'll never host the Olympic Games, they're too small.
Too small.
But so they could feel part of it.
Good,
And so Colin said to the government, but as a diplomat, he could only operate at this level. He couldn't go to the president and say, look, you need to. So they went, oh, yes, good idea, but they didn't do it. So the torch was not able to go to Kiribati. So we're sitting at dinner, 2002, and Colin said, oh, Mr. President, you know, Rosemary was very involved in the Sydney Games. And he turned to me, he said, Rosemary, I'm very disappointed. I rang your Prime Minister, my good friend in the Commonwealth, and I said, we are bringing a team to your Olympic Games. And he said, I said, I know what he said, sir. He said, I'm sorry, I don't have the authority. And he said, I don't understand. He is the elected head of your government. And I thought, oh dear. So I thought about it. I said, Mr. President, it's like this. The International Olympic Committee own the House, but they invite Sydney to put on the party. But they own the House, so they set the rules for who gets an invitation. And to get an invitation, you need to fulfill a number of criteria. And he looked at the sports minister and the treasurer and he said, do we know about this? And they said, yes, sir, because they knew the ambassador was here. He said, why haven't we done it? We need to do it. And Colin said, look, sir, Rosemary knows a lot about the game, how it works, because she's worked with so many delegations and she learned a lot. She would be happy to help, and I will help here in Kiribati. So together, we made sure that they filled in every section accurately that was required by the IOC.
A lot of paperwork.
A lot of paperwork. And then it was submitted to the IOC for approval. And that year, I think there were 7 countries applied. Only Kiribati and East Timor, Timor-Leste, were accepted. And he said to me, look, if we get accepted and you help us, we don't know anything about the Olympic Games. Can you help us? I said, well, you know, it's difficult because you need accreditation. And I'm not an Kiribati person. So I thought about it. I thought, just a minute. I said, however, there is one position that is a bridge between the host country and the visiting country. That's the team attaché. Maybe the new Olympic Committee can make me the team attaché.
That was it.
And that was it. So I went to Kiribati to help them, and I looked and I said, okay, now, they have no television there. Oh, they do now, but they didn't then. No television, no understanding of the world.
No track. I saw videos.
Nothing.
The track was like, it didn't close.
No,
There's a
it's three
section,
lanes.
And
they had 9 pairs of shoes between 100 athletes.
And part of the track, if it rains, it's
coral.
Yeah, and they have to step on the water to race.
Exactly.
So,
9 pairs of shoes with 100 athletes.
Yeah.
And they just try and push their feet into them.
Yeah,
So I went up and I met the committee and I said, okay, now, do you understand about the world media? You know, everybody, and they're saying, that's like a movie. And I said, well, sort of, but people have television in their homes. Some of them had been away to New Zealand or Fiji and understood.
They don't have the certain notion of how the world operated then.
Not at all.
Maybe now it's better because
Yeah, it is better now, yes, because of
but
the
then,
internet.
and we were talking about 2004, not so long ago.
Yeah. So I said to them, now, opening ceremony, we need a uniform. Ah, they said, we have some T-shirts in the cupboard. We only wore them once for the South Pacific Games. Now, bear in mind, the biggest island in Kiribati is 25 kilometres long, 200 metres wide. That's it.
That's it.
But there's thousands of coral atolls. So, and they wash in seawater. So I thought, oh, T-shirts washed in seawater. I said, no, I think we need something new. Don't worry, I will fix it. So what I decided to do was, rather than just go order it and pay for it myself, I contacted a man who makes Olympic pins. He actually makes them for Brazil. And I said, could you... Oh, he was thrilled because Kiribati was the newest Olympic nation.
Yeah, sure.
And suddenly I'm asking him, would you mind? And he's going,
Yeah.
So, and I said, can you make me some extra? And I'm going to sell them. And so my husband was in Rotary, so I went to Rotary, and I sold these pins everywhere.
To pay for the uniform.
And I said, and if you buy a pin, you will know that you helped to put a uniform on Olympic athletes. So they all loved that. And the kids at this high school got behind me and sold some.
Yeah.
So off we go to Athens, and I thought, opening ceremony night, oh gosh.
Just before that, I read something about this, and they were pretty much overwhelmed by the size of Athens. They had no idea how the world could be that big.
Let me tell you,
Yeah.
we went 1 year before. I went with the Secretary General, and we're driving around, and he just kept looking. He couldn't believe it. And he kept saying, there's hot water coming from the tap in the bathroom. I said, yes. So we're driving back, and it was very tiring for me because all day I had to explain what we were looking at. You saw the track in Kiribati.
Sure.
Well, suddenly there's like 20-something venues for all the sports.
Yeah, it's huge, yeah.
And we're driving back, and the sun was going down in Athens, and there was the Acropolis. And I said to him, oh,
Is this where it all started?
really, look at that.
Yeah.
This is the Acropolis. And he said, what does that mean? I said, well, it's a very famous place. Have you heard of the Parthenon? He said, no. I said, look, tourists come from all over the world to look at this. They visit it, they film it, they take photographs. And he looked at it and he said to me, but why? It's old and it's broken. And I thought, okay. So then we get
set of mind, yeah.
So we get to, and in fact, I kept saying to them, the athletes, come on, we're going, let me show you. They had an apartment and they just wanted to stay inside. And then the first day I went, there was only one girl on the team, Cassianano. And I said to her, Cassianano, show me your uniform. And she showed me it. And I said, and shoes? And she brought out one of these old shoes. They were torn, they were broken. Oh. And that week before, I had gone to Athens to do a survey. but I also went to help the Australian team to distribute the uniforms. And Nike were doing all their shoes.
Yeah.
And I was still finishing up there. So I went to the Nike people and I said, here's the situation. And I took out the shoe and I said, this is what this girl is going to compete in. Do you have any extra shoes?
Just one pair of extra shoes?
Just one pair. And they said, oh, in that, we don't have any, and we can't give you an Australian shoe because it's got Australia on it. I said, no, I understand. They said, look, we've got a pair of last season's. I said, I don't care if it's 6 seasons ago. And they
better
were,
than this,
they were red.
Yeah.
They were red like plastic.
Yeah.
And I took them back and I gave the box to Kai. I said, no. She cried. She took them, she slept with them. She'd never seen a pair of shoes in her life like this. So, opening ceremony night, I said to my husband, I bought tickets. My husband and I bought tickets, even though I was, but I didn't really understand what my accreditation allowed me to do. So, I said, I'm going to the village to make sure they're all ready. And we were told 5:15 on that corner you get on the blue bus to go to the stadium. So I get to 4:30. I got to the village and to our apartment. On the door, no answer. Knocked. Oh, I thought, oh bless them, they're so excited. They're on the bus stop already. So I ran up to the bus stop. No. So I went back, knocked again. Somebody over there and said, Rosemary, we're sleeping. I said, you're going to the opening ceremony in 25 minutes. So we got them all up and into the uniform. And just when we're leaving, and I checked them all, the chef de mission of the Kiribati team said, Rosemary, here's your marching pass. And I said, well, what's that? And he said,
you're going with us.
Don't you want to march with the team? And I went, what?
Yeah.
So I quickly rang my husband and said, I'm marching. So my best friend was there from England, so he gave her my ticket. They went together to the stadium. They took the Kiribati flag. And there was a lot of media attention because they were the newest nation. I cannot tell you the feeling standing in that tunnel, waiting to march. I thought, wow, this is my dream.
Sure.
It didn't happen how I thought it would happen, and it certainly didn't happen by me sitting on my bottom. And when I go to schools now, I tell the school children this. Don't let any adult tell you, if you have a dream, you need to keep it. You can't make it happen by sitting down and waiting. You've got to get up and do things, but it can. If you want to write music or make a movie or run for Australia,
be proactive, go for it.
Go for it. And I said, it took me a very long time, and I certainly was not a young woman, but I did it.
Yeah.
And then I did it again in Beijing and in London.
Yeah, all this with Kiribati.
Yes.
In Beijing, and
yes.
Because you also work with Tonga.
Yeah. Well, Tonga asked me if I would help them, because in the Pacific it's like a family. The word goes around quickly. And I said to Tonga, look, I can't. I'm like a mother with Kiribati.
Yeah.
But my husband might, and my husband did. And my husband helped Tonga in Beijing and London. And then his home country, which is also a small country but much more affluent, is Malta.
Yeah.
They asked him for Rio, so he was the team attaché for Rio.
Yeah.
And then with Rio, I was with Tonga.
Yeah.
But
did you march with Tonga in Rio or not?
No, because I was not attaché. I was the guest of the Secretary General, so I sat up and watched. I would like to have marched, but they changed the rules that Secretary General and guests could not march anymore.
But all cameras were on the flag bearer with that coconut oil.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. He grabbed all the attention anyway.
But it just was, you know, I just thought, okay, and then I from Athens I went to the Melbourne Commonwealth Games in Beijing, and then to India to the Commonwealth Games, then to London, and then to Glasgow for the Commonwealth Games, Rio, and I've just recently done the Gold Coast.
And you went to Rio in 2007 also to be a volunteer.
Oh yes, in
In
2007, COB contacted me and said, we have the Pan American Games, any chance you could be in Brazil around that time? So it was interesting actually, because I said, yeah, I'll come. And she said, well, can you work with especially the people who were in the Games Family Hotel? And it was really great because I was able to give the volunteers a lot of practical advice. And then one day I was having a problem in the office in international relations, and this man came in and he sat down, and I looked at him and I got pretty upset with the previous woman who was really difficult. And it turned out she wasn't even a proper delegate. She was the auntie of somebody in a delegation.
Yeah.
And this man came in, and it was transport was always the issue in 2007. They didn't have enough vehicles. And he came in and he sat down and he said, I'm here to talk about a car. And I just rolled my eyes and I looked at his accreditation. I said, Mr. Greenaway, how can I help you? And he was from the British Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
So you
have this thing with very small nations.
Yes, yes. So I got him his car, and then he said, I'm new to the job, you obviously know a lot about it, can you come out to the village? And I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to go to the village, I'm accredited. So off I went, and we're talking, and he said, so how did you learn? And I said, oh, well, you know, I went to Athens. He said, you were with Kiribati? And I said, yes, I was. He said, I was at the chef's assembly in 2003 and you were there, and your chef fell asleep in Singapore and missed the plane. I said, that's the one. And he said, I was so excited for you. You were so enthusiastic about the games. And he said, so then I helped him and I told him a lot about how to access Olympic solidarity funding and
you helped them in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, to host British Virgin Islands, wasn't it?
Yes. So, well, what I did was in 2007,
yeah.
He said to me, right, the games are in London in 2012. Can you help us? We don't have the funding to bring our athletes in, and it's much colder than where we've been. They need to acclimatise, get their muscles, but we don't have the money to pay for London hotels.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, leave it with me. So my best friend Shirley, that watched me in Athens, and she, poor woman, she's been involved, and her husband and her adult sons. Yeah. I said, Shirley, do you have an athletic track near your village? She said, Rosemary, there's one about 500 metres away, but it's behind a big load of trees. You've probably never seen it. Right. I said, do you think your village would be interested in hosting maybe 6 or 7 people from the British Virgin Islands? Not a lot, the coach and a couple of athletes. So she said, look, I'll tell you what, I won't ask them, but you'll come in for 5 months. Why don't we have a barbecue, get all the people that I think might do it, you do your pitch when they've had a few glasses of wine, and we'll see. Well, she had so many people that wanted to host, because it was their opportunity to have a connection to the London Games. And then I used to go to all the schools in the area where I was born, Hertfordshire, and take the mascots and talk about the games. And I had one little school that said they wanted to help Kiribati, and they raised all the money in the school for funding their opening ceremony shirts. And I did that by getting 2 mascots, which I then sent around the world to places where I knew an Olympic committee. And we took photographs of the mascot in Malta, in Singapore, in Kuala Lumpur, in Canberra, in Melbourne, in Fiji, in New Zealand. And then the final place was Kiribati. Then the Kiribati chef carried the mascot in his luggage back to London just before the schools closed, like 2 days before the opening ceremony, and we took the mascots back to the school, and the school children gave us the uniforms. They loved it. And I said to the British Virgin Islands, look, I'm really sorry, I would love to be your attaché, I can't do it, but my friend Shirley has put all the work in her village, so how about you make her attaché? So
that was it.
and it was great because the opening ceremony, there was my husband, there was me, there was Shirley. We were right out there in the middle of the stadium saying, do you believe this?
And you have great experience with the Olympic Games and the Commonwealth Games. Nobody in Brazil knows about Commonwealth Games,
No.
But it's a big thing.
Yes.
And you were here in Pan American Games 2007.
Yes.
Did you then feel that Brazil could host the Olympic Games? Or
yes,
no? Yeah.
yes, I did. I mean, I wrote a big report and with things they did well and things they did not so well. But my strong feeling was they could get a really good volunteer program, and honestly, volunteers carry every Olympic Games.
Without them, forget
I mean,
it.
bless them, in Beijing they were so well trained, but they were like robots.
No
Anything outside of...
no heart in it. Yeah.
And the problem is you have cultural issues there, like in China, if they don't know, they won't tell you they don't know because they think
They're
it's
ashamed.
insulting
No,
to
you lose your
you,
face.
and it's insulting to you
No, it's also
that they
to them.
don't know, and that's shame
They
for
lose their
them.
face, yeah.
So I felt like there would be none of this problem in Brazil.
Yeah.
So I was able to spend a lot of time writing many things about what the volunteers needed to do and what they needed to do to support the volunteers.
Yeah, many people don't know that, but the Brazilian Pan American Games 2007 was a step forward for the competition.
Yes.
It really improved on the past editions. It really was a big Pan American Games. And regarding Brazil, you were also there in 2009 in Copenhagen when we won.
I went with them, yes,
Yeah.
because in 2007 they were talking seriously,
Sure.
and then in 2008 at the Beijing Games it was obvious.
That we're going
Because
for.
they'd already put the bid document in, and then they were really lobbying. And I said to COB people, newsmen, and there was a couple of other people that they'd called in. Somebody that came from Globo, I think he headed up one department. And I sat down with them and I talked to them about delegates that I knew and what I thought was needed. And my friends in Brazil kept saying to me, the games need to be in Sao Paulo when we're more organised, we're more commercial. I kept saying to them, you don't understand. I know the delegates that are voting. They will not vote for Sao Paulo. They want to go to Rio because they've seen this.
Yeah.
And they've seen Copacabana. The delegates that are voting for the Olympic Games, first of all, they look at each city, is it organised? And what venues and what are they offering and what are our athletes and what's the transport, what's the security, all those issues important. But then, if all those things are quite equal, it comes down to what city do I want to take my team to?
Atmosphere, yeah, pretty much the look of the thing, yeah, makes a difference.
But we were quite surprised because we worked out, we thought, I think there was Tokyo, Madrid,
Chicago
and us. And my thinking from my experience was, okay, 2009 is the vote, 2008 is Beijing, so this is Asia, they'll go. 2012 is London, so Madrid will go. Then you've got Chicago and Rio. Then what comes into play when they're voting is the time zone. What is good for my country to watch the events?
The United States liked very much that it was pretty much the same time zone.
And so then I thought, between Chicago and Rio.
And a big selling pitch was that there was never an Olympics in South America.
Yeah, but
So-
Chicago had all the infrastructure
Sure,
and
sure.
the money and the
And
organization.
Barack Obama behind.
And then they brought Obama in, and I thought, oh. But you know, I don't know who briefed Obama. He got up, and I thought, what are you talking about? He stood up and he started talking about how many great universities there were in and around Chicago. Who cares? This is about a sporting event.
Yeah.
So his briefing was terrible.
I think that made some difference, yeah.
Oh,
And Chicago was the first
and
to
I-
go, was
and
the
I-
first to lose, yeah.
no, yeah, they were shocked.
Yeah.
And so when the vote came and Chicago was the first one, I thought, I don't know now. You know,
Anything goes
I
now.
don't know.
Yeah.
And then I thought maybe Tokyo, because they're always so organized. But I have to say, then Tokyo went, and then it was us in Madrid. And what
But
they
you were right, Tokyo, just 8 years after Beijing, didn't make that much sense. Yeah, Brazil was hot then.
yes,
Because Chicago out, yeah, Madrid with London just 4 years later.
yeah. So
Yeah.
But I have to say, what happened was they do the vote. You know, Chicago out, do the vote, Tokyo out, and then it's Madrid and Rio.
Yeah.
And then what they do is they vote, and then they don't announce it for about 1.5 hours
Yeah.
to give all the. They announce
suspense.
to the world, because they have to allow during the daytime for those cities to go overtime or more questions. So they give a good break from the last vote to the announcement.
And add some drama
In
too.
case the day, yes. And it gives the media an opportunity. So we all went, and I was there all day in the hotel with all the Rio staff, and we sat there when the first round of voting, we're all sitting there waiting to hear Tokyo is out.
Yeah, and it was Chicago.
And when it was Chicago, we all went, what?
Yeah.
Then we didn't know, and then we were nervous. And of course, we were not in the room where the voting was happening. We were downtown in a hotel, and it was all being beamed in live to
Yeah.
us. We were like this when they had the envelope,
Yeah.
and then it was party
Yeah.
time.
You were the witness for Adhemar's second gold medal and this, two gigantic moments in Brazil's history, yeah, sporting history.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Did you think of Adhemar right there and then?
oh, absolutely. You know, my first thought was, oh, damn, he died. And if,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I might be wrong, but in my opinion, there would have been no question in Brazil about who lit the Olympic
Oh, yeah.
cauldron.
Although Vanderlei Cordeiro de Lima was a big, I think it was great, but Adhemar would have been a great name. Yeah.
But
Too
what
bad.
disappointed me was during the torch relay, many times Rio kept saying to me, oh, thank you, Rosemary, you know, you helped a lot, how can we thank you? I said, you can have Adhemar represented on the torch relay in Brazil by his daughter or his grandson,
Never happened.
neither.
Yeah.
And Diego said to me, Rosemary, I had to go downtown and watch a 16-year-old pop singer carry the Olympic torch.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so bad
Yeah.
and so wrong and so disrespectful
Yeah.
to... we're talking about an Olympic torch and an Olympian who gave a lot to Brazil. And in his whole life, you know, in this day and age, if he had 2 gold medals, imagine how wealthy he would be.
Yeah.
But
No,
he worked until the day
he
he
couldn't have
died.
money. He was an amateur.
Yes.
They tried to give a house. And
Yes,
he had
I
to say
know.
no. He had to say no.
And
because
even-
he would lose his gold medal. From
Exactly. And even later,
Yeah.
you know, he could have, but he couldn't and he didn't. And he didn't even use his name like in corporations in Brazil to go and do motivational speeches in late life. He was at university doing physical education, and then he'd fly down to Florianopolis and train a group
I think
of
if
kids.
it was today, maybe he would have been giving speeches, but it wasn't so big then, a thing to do.
In early
Many-
2000, yeah.
I don't think so, no. So it really was a shame. But then Rio got the bid. He would host the Olympics in 2016. But you foresaw that Brazil would have some problems regarding volunteers.
Yes,
because we don't have this culture
You
that,
don't.
for instance, Britain has.
And I saw the same problem in Greece.
Yeah.
Look, in Greece, if you fall down in the street outside somebody's house, they'll all run out, bring you in and help you.
Yeah.
But they just don't have the I think it's a very
It's a culture.
European
Yeah.
cultural, and I think it's cultural, but fortunately the volunteers I dealt with obviously had to have English as well as Portuguese, and some of them had other languages as well. But they were young and they were flexible and adaptable and they were excited, and they did listen to me, and I felt like they felt connected to me. All right, I'm not Brazilian, but I had such a strong connection to Brazil. And every day I wore this shirt when I was training them, the same as them. They felt like I was kind of adopted Brazilian.
How did you feel we got out of this? At the end of the day, when the Olympics got over, you think Brazil passed its test? It's a good Olympics regarding volunteers.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think pretty well. I think the venues were pretty good.
Yeah, sure.
Considering all the problems and dramas leading up and all the financial crisis, there were lots of things not done, but in general, I think Rio delivered a good games.
And what about in London, which was closer to your home?
Yeah.
Was it special to you as well?
Yes, it was. It was, and of course that was also Adhemar's first Olympic Games.
Yeah, sure.
And it was extraordinary how he said to me, when he was playing football here, and then he was earmarked as being a possible field athlete, and he said he had to borrow a tracksuit from São Paulo Football Club to go to London and then wash it and give it back to them. I mean, imagine nowadays. And he said he didn't really know where London was.
Nothing, yeah.
And he said, and when I walked in, and you have to remember, it was, everybody's saying, oh, we should get the Olympic Games going, but it was so quickly after the Second World War.
Yeah.
Nobody had any money. And London said, okay, we'll do it, we'll
Stays,
try.
Yeah.
And all right, I'm sure. And that's why London really wanted the chance in 2012 to do it better.
Yeah.
But he said, I was terrified, and I walked into the stadium. He said, my first reaction was, I'm in the wrong place. You don't get a crowd like this at track and field. It must be a football. And this is Wembley Stadium. It must be. And then he realized, he said, I sat there watching, and he said, the thing I realized was when an athlete who spoke English got up to jump, they took support and motivation from the crowd because they were shouting out in English. And he said, I sat there, but when I got up to jump, he said, I was like frozen.
Yeah.
My legs didn't work. And he said, I felt like a failure, but I still went every day to watch what was happening. And with that observation, he said, I went home and I said, right, where are the next Olympic Games? I will learn that language. Well, it couldn't have been any more difficult for him. Finland.
Finnish.
I mean, Finnish is such a tough language. But he did it.
He learned it.
He learned it, and of course that's when he did the very first victory lap in Olympic history.
Yeah.
The crowd got behind him,
Yeah, sure.
supported him.
Yeah, he sang songs when he arrived in Finland. Yeah,
In Finnish.
yeah, fantastic. He
So-
was very charismatic.
Oh,
He
amazing.
was a gentleman. From everything I read about him, he was a gentleman. He should have been an ambassador, I think, for Brazil. He would have been fantastic.
Yes.
And
He was
wasn't
for a
bad
short
as
time.
a
He
student.
went to Nigeria in the
Yeah,
Trade Commission.
for 3 years.
But he really should have,
been more.
because he spoke Japanese, he spoke
That
Finnish,
language,
he
I think.
spoke English, he spoke
Yeah.
Portuguese,
And very well.
Spanish. He spoke 5 well. I don't know about the others, but extraordinary man. And I watched him here in Rio at the book launch. Just prior to that, he had a selected group of young Brazilian athletes who were earmarked as having potential and being possible Olympians, and they had to sign a contract promising, to train and etc., etc. But he sat down with him, and I'm really sorry in that situation that I don't speak Portuguese, because I watched these young people just mesmerized by what he was saying. And I asked him later, what do you say? And he said, I just talked about their journey, and they need to be dedicated, and it's not going to be easy, but they could come to me and I can talk to them. And it was just, then they couldn't wait to sign and get started.
Yeah,
he had this
aura
and capacity to inspire, as he did me,
he
in
said
a different way.
He was a prince because his father would have been an African king. And we can believe it. Yeah,
yes.
He looks somewhat imperial or
yes.
royal in a certain way. He really was very polite, very gentle, very easygoing. Yeah.
But I really felt at times it was like he was on my shoulder.
Yeah, sure.
And so, just one day in one Olympic stadium, changed my life.
Yeah, sure. And what about next? Seems like Tokyo so far hasn't been in touch with you. We
No,
spoke before.
I have offered to help them, but again, in the Japanese culture, they really want to do it their way with their people. I think the problem is, like here in Rio, they don't know what they don't know. And you can learn all the facts about the athletes' village and where the training is and the transport and the food, but the volunteers working in the athletes' village with the delegations need to know more than that. That role is.
And I think Sydney pushed the envelope on that.
Yes, they did.
Totally, because up to Atlanta, it was very much a thing like you go there and see those people and greet them. It was very improvised.
Yes.
And from Sydney on, I think
it's changed.
It changed a lot.
Yes, it did. And my friends at COB say, and my friends from Malta say, Sydney was the benchmark.
Yeah, people say.
And I know leading up to Athens, they did not want to hear the S word.
They're sick of it. But people say that Sydney Olympics maybe was the best Olympics of all time.
Well, I think we were lucky, yes. Not because it was Sydney. Yes, they were fantastic. But you have to remember, Sydney was in 2000, and it was 1 year before 9/11 when security changed for the whole world. And that is now
paranoid.
Such an overriding factor. You can't have the easygoing friendliness.
There were two moments in Olympic history that I think it changed a lot. In 1972 in Munich. Before Munich was like a party. Yes. Everybody could come in. It was great. And Moreno, a former Brazilian volleyball player, told me that up until Mexico City in 1968 was excellent. And from then on, and he saw it. He saw the terrace, like 10 meters from him. Brazil was very close to Israel in the Olympic Village. And this 2000.
And I feel sorry for the Greeks, really, because they're not a large nation.
And they were in an economic crisis.
And they're leading up. But when they got the games, they looked at the budget that Sydney had set, and they said, all right, Sydney allowed, for example, I don't remember the figure, like $2 million for security. Sure. And they thought, all right, we've got that, Black November terrorist group in Greece that causes problems. So we will double the budget. But by the time 2004 arrived, they needed, instead of 4 million, they needed 10 million. And that destroyed them. Yeah. Brazil was lucky in many ways that security wasn't a major issue. Yeah, but I was scared, I must say. Because if a terrorist attack here, it pretty much kills the Olympic Games. Yes, it does. It pretty much, everybody remembers Munich, and it was a great Olympic of the terrorist attack. Nobody talks about it. I have to say, London was one I was most nervous about. Yeah, because London is very much threatened by terrorist groups and so on. Yes. I feared Brazil.
Maybe it's always a stage for a terrorist
But when
group
you
too.
saw on every street corner tanks with young army officers, and I kept looking, thinking, are they old enough to hold a gun? They look so young.
Yeah, but fortunately everything went well.
Yes,
I think it was a good Olympics in Rio. It wasn't the best ever, but considering it's very good.
Yeah.
No big problems.
And I think what was great was
Great venues.
you kind of were left with quite some good infrastructure, like your railway system.
Yeah,
I don't know how it is
yeah.
now, but it was great during the games.
There was improvement to the city, yeah. People say that there are many white elephants, as they call here in Brazil,
Yes.
which you build a stadium that's never used, and it did happen. This is a real problem.
But at least
there
they
were
use
advancements.
the Maracanã will always be used, so that is never going to be a white elephant.
Yeah, no, Maracanã was pretty much for the 2014 World Cup.
Yes.
But the rest, there are some things that Maria Lenk Stadium, for instance, is very much used.
The swimming,
Yeah.
yes. But that was an established one though, wasn't it?
No, they improved a lot to the Olympics.
But then didn't you just build it, the main pool was temporary?
Yeah. They improved Maria Lenk a lot. Maria Lenk was for 2007, but it was
Yes.
nowhere near what it is now.
Mm.
Now it's much better venue, let's say.
Yes.
So I think Rio was a good
And
Olympics.
some of those lovely wooden things between the temporary swimming pool and the Mariolena other one, in between were those lovely round buildings with all the timber on the outside. They were permanent.
I don't know.
What they
Yeah.
they use them for weightlifting
Yeah.
and volleyball.
No,
and
some things are
basketball.
used. There always is corruption, all those problems. They are real. We can't ignore them. But there was advancements. I think Rio is a better city now after this, in spite of all the corruption that there was. You can't not see that it happened, but there was an improvement. I think the fact that the Olympics happened made some advancements in Rio that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Mm.
And I think that's true for every city
Yes.
that hosts the Olympics.
But you see, I believe like the bird's nest in Beijing now is not used very much.
Yeah, maybe not. But they use it to sell a lot. It's a marketing thing.
Well, yes.
The Olympics, very much. They
Yes.
sold China there. And I think
Oh,
they
yes.
sold very well.
And I think it was interesting for China even because many of the young people I worked with did not have much access to the internet. A lot of stuff was blocked. But for the Olympic Games, they had to unblock.
Yeah.
And once it was unblocked, that was
You
it.
can't hold back.
You
yeah.
can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, it's over.
So, and I think China opened up
Yeah.
a lot.
And now for closing, what next for Rosemary Mula? Even if Tokyo don't call you up, will you go there anyway? Because you did that many times in the past. You paid yourself to go to the...
I paid everywhere myself.
You have a very expensive hobby, yeah.
That's what my husband
Yeah.
said. Find another hobby, darling.
Please.
But his is horse racing, so he
I
can't
think
talk.
I think he bought the idea already. I think it's in, yeah.
Yes. No, probably, and I think the saddest thing is, my heart and my energy and my experience is all there, but I have to be mindful too. I have senior years on the board, so, and it is very tiring.
Yeah.
I find it, I don't want to do half a job. I either do it well or I don't do it. And when I say do it well, I have to do it with a lot of enthusiasm and energy. And as you get older, you get a bit less energetic. But certainly if Tokyo want me,
Yeah, sure.
I'll do
You
it.
would go if they call.
I
you.
will.
Yeah.
I will. The French, who knows?
Yeah, that's too far ahead, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rosemary, thank you very much. Thank you for everything you've done for all those countries, for Brazil as well. You've done more for Brazil than many Brazilians. It can be
Thank
said.
you.
And thanks for honoring Adhemar's image.
That's something I take every opportunity at every games, is to talk about him and say, I'm the reason.
Yeah.
And it's amazing in Rio how many of those young, educated volunteers
Didn't know about him.
know. And I would say to them, who is your greatest ever Olympian?
Yeah.
And his name almost never came
It's
up.
mentioned, yeah.
I said, it doesn't matter what sport.
Yeah.
So a few people said Robert Schreit.
Yeah. He won
Okay.
2 gold medals as well,
Yes.
silver and bronze. Yeah, it's a great Olympian, but
Mm.
Adhemar many people don't know that. He won the second and the third gold medal for Brazil in Brazil's history. When he won in 1956, which we were there, it was the only medal Brazil got. That was it.
The only?
The gold medal for Adhemar and nothing else. Nothing else. So, we had won a gold medal in 1920, our first participation, a shooter, Guilherme Parense won gold. Then 1952, 32 years for Adhemar to win our second.
Wow.
1956, you were there. And we would only win gold medals again 1980. And that was boycott from the United States and many European countries. And we won two gold medals there.
In Russia,
in
Moscow.
Yeah. So if Adhemar didn't exist or didn't went into sports, and this could have happened, we would have waited from 1920 to 1980. That's how big he was.
Yes.
He was everything. And when he won his second gold medal, we hadn't won a World Cup yet in football. We had 0.
Yeah.
So he was big when we weren't big, not even in football. And many people don't honor him, but we are doing our part here.
Yes, I hope so.
And you certainly did your share.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. I'll do more interviews later. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.